Time to smash it up on a Monday night in the off-season where things are changing by the minute. He's Ira Schafel, managing editor of Warchant.com. My name is Tom Lang. Tonight's program, as always on Warchant TV, is brought to you by State Farm agent Russ Voorhis. Coming up in this hour, Juan Soto talk. And no, I'm just kidding. Talk about news and notes, Florida State transfer portal. Ira and I are going to talk a lot about that over the next 20, 30 minutes. Florida State coaching developments. Maybe we'll put a bow on FSU closing strong late last week in recruiting. And then Michael Langston, senior recruiting analyst and portal analyst. You got to add that to the business card if you're Michael or you're Matt Lasser or even Ira, really. I mean, add the transfer portal line to the list. We will be taking your questions on all of those developments, as I know a lot of people were chatting before the show began about the portal itself. That's all the platitudes and the hellos. Ira, how's it going tonight?
It's good, man. I think I might have been the second most happy about the Soto acquisition on the staff because I'm glad to see him leave the American League. I know Corey and Jeff are probably not happy to see him come back to the National League. So
it's A-okay in this world. Hey, if you're going to be worth 7 times a Steinbrenner, you might as well act like you're worth 7 times a Steinbrenner. But
congratulations.
Thank you. Let's hope Steve Cohen somehow realizes he's got a Florida State tie in his life somewhere, Ira, because maybe then he could help. He could help with all types of budgeting for Florida State on all fronts. But I have to say, to start, awesome interview today on the Jeff Cameron Show. We were talking as well, Jeff and I, about Florida State's close at 2-10 on the recruiting trail to get flips from all sorts of SEC institutions. Basically, if there's a good one, they flipped a kid in the last week from that institution to their own class.
Yeah.
If you're able to accomplish that at 2-10. I'm expecting to see some pretty good investment and some pretty good chatter in the portal because if you can do that with nothing to stand on in terms of wins and losses, that means that I think the NIL game is strong for Florida State. Just your thoughts about where we stand now as we close the high school part of things and we're getting into the big lift that Florida State's going to have to engage in the portal.
I think it's definitely encouraging. I think there were also some circumstances, I think, with each of those where I think things kind of weighed in FSU's favor. Obviously, the tight end, Gelsey, Florida wanted him as a tight end. Florida State wanted him as a receiver. He wanted to be a receiver, so that worked out really well. Now we have to see, can he be a receiver? He's 6'4", 215, 220 pounds coming out of high school. Can he, be a big-bodied receiver? Or does he need to be more of a tight end? And if that happens, how does he handle that? So that's one where they won kind of the circumstances. I think also, you look at, it sounds like from to the Lee, the defensive end that's signed on Friday, sounds like Florida State played it better than Ole Miss did, in terms of the relationships down the stretch. I think Cromah is one that to me is like the big one where there's no real obvious reason. I mean, other than playing time, I'm sure Florida State can offer more playing time than Georgia can at running back. But I don't think they had a real advantage other than just being all in on him. And I think the investment, probably from an NIL standpoint and everything else was huge. And he always liked Florida State. It was cool that he kept coming back. But yeah, I mean, they kind of played everything really well down the stretch and things fell for them. Whereas I think, the last couple of years where people have been so mad about some of the guys that have flipped away late, sometimes those things weren't in their favor, like the defensive end from Alabama who, ends up, staying home at Auburn. So, sometimes circumstances work in your favor. But, yeah, they deserve a lot of credit, and it is a positive sign going into the future.
Yeah, and even if it's, not something like as cut and dry as you're the highest bidder, like that Florida State is willing to invest in a kid that's going to help them in 2 or 3 years when the now is really it's so important for Mike Norvell. You got to get 2025 right, Ira, and the university has clearly backed Mike Norvell to make the hires they have. Herb Hand is expected to be officially named Florida State's offensive line coach, but that news comes down today after they bring in 3 coaches from Nebraska for the defensive side, and Gus Malzahn was named offensive coordinator before kickoff against Florida State's final game of the season against Florida. It seems like everybody understands the urgency necessary for the moment that Florida State is in. And that's why, I mean, shoot, we had a lot of people waiting for this program to start, Ira. I think the fan base feels the juice in a way that it just was hard to feel in the month of November when you've got a bye week and you're playing Charleston Southern and, you're just losing football games left and right.
Yeah, and it's good to see it. And I understand why fans want to see it, like to believe it, just like with the coaching changes. I know there were some people who wondered, is Mike Norvell really going to make these changes? When you look at the roster, is he really going to make this purge? But I think, if you looked at it realistically, this had to happen. I mean, they have no choice. Florida State, this is not 2003 or 2008 or even 2015, where you're going to be in this conference. And if it's going to take a couple years to get back where you have to get to, you'll deal with it. If you lose some recruiting battles, you have a situation in the coaching staff that's not ideal, you kind of work through those things and you've got time. That is not the situation anymore. Time is of the essence because for a bunch of reasons. Number one, you can flip a roster overnight. You couldn't do that 10 years ago. You couldn't do that 20 years ago. You can flip a roster pretty much overnight, even if you're not a new coaching staff. You have to make changes on your coaching staff. You have to do whatever you can to win immediately because the pressure in terms of what's on the line for Florida State in terms of the renovations to Doak Campbell Stadium. They're trying to get people to continue buying tickets to fill that stadium, which is newly renovated with newer prices, a different price structure. So they need to be successful for that. They need to be successful to continue getting donations for other facilities in the NIL. And they also need to stay successful for whatever happens in the future from a conference standpoint. Whenever they get out of the ACC and get into wherever they're going to be, they need to be as marketable as possible. So for all those reasons, like it's not like, okay, like you were joking about Steve Cohen. Like it's not like in pro sports right now where, if you have an owner in the Orioles case, the Angelos family was not going to spend a lot of money on free agents, or Jeff's Pirates, they're not going to spend a lot of money on free agents. And you just kind of got to grin and bear it. Florida State doesn't have a choice. They have to be all in. So they're doing it. It's not a surprise to me though, because they really don't have any other choice.
And that's what everybody is hitting up warchant.com for right now. Transfer portal exits from the current roster and then, visits that are scheduled. All these things are available on the Tribal Council and the Premium Recruiting Board. If you're looking for the outflow, that's kind of more on the Tribal Council side. If you're looking for the rumors, the incoming, yes, the import market, the export market. Art Vandelay, he's Irish Rafael. He controls all of that. He manages all of that. But the importer-exporter on warchant.com is interesting to say the least, as there were a couple of names that raised my eyebrows that left Florida State and said that they were going to greener pastures, as it looks like we might have lost Ira's camera for just a second. I'll see if I can share it up on the screen. The Florida State departures list as we work to get Ira back. But Florida State, as you can see here on the Tribal Council, says goodbye to Destin Hill. Now, I guess, kids can return from the transfer portal and come back. We saw that last year with, excuse me, as there was something in my ear. We saw that with DJ Lundy, who he went out to Colorado and then ended up taking photos in Colorado uniforms and was on Colorado's website as a linebacker. And he came back to Florida State. So I suppose nothing's impossible. But if you're looking at this list of outflow for Florida State, Brian Courtney at tight end later this afternoon announced his intention to go to the transfer portal. Lamont Green Jr. at defensive end, a four-star signee who never made it into the rotation, had some injury concerns earlier in his career. Julian Armella, one of the most often asked about players at Florida State, did not make it onto the field for meaningful snaps in his Florida State career, unless he was to somehow return, as we have Ira back in here. But Destin Hill, I think, is the headliner there, Ira, in terms of guys that are moving on. Maybe A.Z. Thomas declaring for the NFL draft, but your thoughts on that list that we have compiled there on the TC?
Yeah, the AZ one surprised me a little bit. I just wondered if you might wait longer to hear more feedback from the NFL. I doubt. I mean, I could be wrong. I don't think those guys usually get their evaluations this early. So I don't know if he has the clearest information on how high he's going to go in the draft. I wouldn't be mad at him if he wanted to move on, because he has played at a really high level, had a really good year, and he's, they're going to be going through some new changes. You got to learn a new scheme. There are reasons why, and this was such a disastrous year. I get it. I thought he might take a little more time to just kind of find out exactly where he projects, but he'll certainly test well, and smart kid, great kid. Everybody that you talk to around the program loves Azaria Thomas, loves his mom. I've heard more positive things about his mom than any parent I can remember. And so you're happy for him. You wish him the best. He's a guy that I have no doubt will play in the NFL and will represent Florida State extremely well. I mean, incredibly well. And so that's all positive. I kind of wonder, again, how high he's going to go. We'll see. Just, part of it because just this team was so bad. But, and then as far as the transfers, yeah, Destin Hill was the only surprise, through this process, really. Only major surprise through this process, especially one that, I'm bummed about and we talked about it in Jeff's show today. I'm bummed about it, A, because of his talent, but also B, because I think he was really well liked, very popular guy,
Yep.
Very charismatic. I think you got glimpses of his personality with the videos Matt would shoot of the guys coming in to practice before he was injured. Just got a big personality, but I also get it. I think, I was concerned in the spring, like when Greedy Vance left, there's some other guys from that New Orleans core of guys, and Destin's one of them that I kind of wondered about. And, just because, they were pretty tight and they all kind of gravitated towards each other. And it's when you're out for a season, you can't play, you're injured, you're just rehabbing. A lot of times you can drift a little bit. And obviously this was a terrible season. So, and his receivers coach got replaced and his offensive coordinator got replaced. So there's a lot of reasons it's not shocking, but it just bums me out a little bit because I think he was talented. Plus, I think a good vibe for the locker room.
Yeah, I can understand why fans are upset about this particular departure, just because Florida State waited so long for Destin Hill. They waited so long for him to arrive on campus, and then you seem like you're on the brink of productivity and all of that patience paying off, and then the injury happens and sets him back. And we've got a lot of questions on this in the chat right now, either about the receivers coach in general or Destin Hill, what gives. Ira, it probably is more than the fact that Florida State doesn't have a receivers coach in place right now. It probably is something more about just get a clean reset. What would you say?
Yeah, no, I don't think that's it. Let me say this: if the offense was staying the same and you brought in a new receivers coach, you were in between receivers coaches, I don't think that would be a factor. When you add in all of these things I'm talking about, I could see it being like, like anybody at home when you're making a decision, whether it's to take a job or to buy a car, you do your pros and cons. And I'm sure right now, if Destin Hill's doing a pros and cons list, or if he was last week, or just in his head, there's a lot of things that aren't what he expected or what he wanted. He probably liked Alex Atkins. He probably liked Ron Dugans. He liked some of the guys on the team that he was close with that have left. And now you take those out of the way, and now it's a bunch of change, and you're coming back from an injury. I mean, I get it. It's not – it doesn't, to me, it's not if they had a receivers coach that's going to solve everything. He still had those other issues. Having said all that, he's not officially in the portal from last I checked. And when I, and again, I started hearing this last week. And so I've been asking around a little bit, and, it's not official, but it did seem like the people I talked to kind of were resigned to the idea that he was going to go in the portal. Yep. And then today, Pete Nakos from On3 confirmed it as well. So, yeah, I don't think it has anything to do with the receivers coach. On the receivers coach front, I don't believe an announcement is imminent there. I talked to some people today that they're very excited about who they're talking to. And, I think but it's still a little bit early in the process. So I don't think there's a deal about to be done. Now, I'll say that, and maybe Ross Dellinger or Pete Nakos or somebody will report something tonight, but I don't believe it's that imminent on the receivers coach. But I do think they're very excited about who they're talking to, and I think it'll be coming pretty soon.
It seems like Florida State mostly has what they want in terms of the staff members. What'll be interesting, Ira, is to see about retention of staff members from this previous season, and if there's repurposing of some of those guys that, whether they back off and take an off the field role, or if maybe there's a position change or a concentration change. But it does seem like, and just to get your broad opinion, I know things can change and things are fluid if guys come available, but it seems like maybe the pink slip part of it is kind of done, or do you think that there could be maybe some more departures for Florida State in terms of the guys that on the offensive side, Tony Tokars would be an example, or Chris Thompson or John Papuchis on the defensive side? Just your general sense of where things are right now.
Yeah, I would say two things. Number one, I would say from a big picture standpoint, I don't know that it's all 100% done. And I think there's some flexibility. Like, it's interesting now how the staffs are going to look in the new era of college football with the rules changes. Again, it was after last season started that they went to this new rule where you could have unlimited staff coaching, a limited analyst coaching. So from my understanding, Gus Malzahn, from what I'm hearing, is not going to coach a position. So it's not like he has to take the Tony Tokar's quarterback's role or he has to take a different position. He's going to be not counted as one of the 10 that go on the road recruiting. And so you can keep some of those guys. So it's not necessarily like, oh, we've got to make room for him. On the defensive side, you've got some flexibility there because, again, Tony White is the defensive coordinator. And ostensibly, he's coached corners, he's coached linebackers, he played linebacker. You've got a corners coach and you've got a safeties coach and Patrick Surtain and Cooper. So when you look at, is he going to coach linebackers because Randy Shannon's gone? Or could you bring in somebody else and move Papuchis to linebackers? So I think there's still some flexibility there. I don't know that they've 100% said we're done. But I also don't think that they necessarily have to free up space to make things work in terms of the coordinators.
Yeah, it's not like it used to be with accounting of coaches in terms of guys who can hit the road. Yeah, of course, you would trade some of those responsibilities, but I mean, once there's on-field instruction in practice and in games, I mean, it's just it's the Wild West in its own. If there wasn't enough Wild West for you in college football, now there is in that regard as well. So stay tuned to Warchant for that particular information. If you're looking for a coordinator hire for your insurance purposes, might be interest you in State Farm agent Russ For, his sponsor of the Monday Smash. He has been for a long time, and he is a sponsor, quote unquote, if you will, of a lot of Florida State athletics endeavors. That could be on the booster side, the collective side, and obviously with outlets such as us at Warchant, one of the original sponsors on warchant.com and now the Multimedia Network. Outstanding service and service available to you in the state of Florida, Alabama, and Georgia. If you live anywhere in those three states, he's got you covered. If you want to go see him and you live on the east coast of the state of Florida, you can find Russ Forrest in Jacksonville Beach and Orange Park. I'll give you the Orange Park phone number tonight, 904-276-9535, 904-276-9535. He knows of which he speaks, and he has an excellent staff that can help you get set. I'm a customer of Russ Forrest, and you should investigate. Because, Ira, those insurance companies, they tend to raise rates on you, and they just think you're not going to look into it and see if you can find a better deal. Russ Forrest would be more than happy to talk to you.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Insurance is one of those things you got to constantly be paying attention to because, like you said, your plans can change, things like that. You can't just let it ride for eternity. And if you get a chance to kind of reconsider what you're doing, give Russ a call, go to their website. You can talk Florida State sports with him. He's got a great staff, and they love hearing that Warchant in the Monday Smash send people their way. So if you could do that, that would be helpful. It would help. It would make him happy that he's helping Noles, and it would also be good for us as well.
Coming up pretty soon here, Michael Langston, senior recruiting analyst and a portal analyst, joining us to answer your questions. So please make sure that you file those questions about visits and players and positions into the chat. Director Ben Spicer behind the scenes will collect those questions up for Michael. That comes soon. A footnote for everybody: on Wednesday at 11:30 in the morning, Florida State is going to introduce its coordinators formally. You're going to have press conferences. Gus Malzahn and Tony White speaking to the media on Wednesday around lunchtime. Those videos in their entirety will be available on Warchant TV lunchtime on Wednesday, so be on the lookout for that. But I'm going to repurpose now, Ira, a graphic that we used before, and I think this is about the offseason, but here it is. It's your Christmas list. I want to know Ira's Christmas list when it comes to portal shopping. We've done the grocery shopping thing in the portal before. Just your own preference, sir. Nothing about what you think is the most important. What are you most interested in? Where should Florida State go shopping for the holidays?
Yeah, I mean, man, to me, it starts with quarterback and offensive line. I feel good. I feel pretty good, cautiously optimistic about what they're going to get on defense with his new coaching staff. Matt Lasser has a story up on the site with Michael. You can go to warchant.com. There's a story about several of those Nebraska players who've gone into the portal, defensive lineman types that are now in the portal and visiting Florida State coming up soon. And Matt talked to one of them today. They're coming, I believe, on Monday. You can read more about that. Obviously, Thomas Castellanos, the quarterback who was at BC, is coming in for a visit as well. So there's that's all ramping up. But yeah, to me, I'm really most focused on quarterback and offensive line. I don't think they need to get 5 offensive linemen. Again, I remind people that Richie Leonard was a starter, went out with an injury early in the year. If his rehab goes well and he stays here, which I assume he will, he's been telling everybody he will. I think he's a solid starter. You didn't get a real good look at him because he started all last year at Florida, then came to Florida State in 2024, got injured early in the season. But I think he's a guy who can be in the mix. I think Jacob Rizzi can play. I think Early and Otto showed some potentials. They've got another year under a new offensive line coach. So there's some pieces to work with. But, yeah, I think you need to bring in 3 or 4 offensive linemen that you feel like can really help at least. And so that's the one. And then quarterback. And honestly, man, people have gotten kind of excited about the Castellanos thing, and excited in a good and a bad way. It's animated people. A lot of people have strong opinions whether or not Castellanos is what they need or what they don't need. I honestly, again, depending on part of it, depending on what, Brock Glenn and Luke Kromenhoek do, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world maybe to bring in 2 quarterbacks. And so maybe you could convince a Castellanos and somebody else to come in and battle. Now most people would say, oh, there's no way. And maybe not. We'll see. But that may be a route you can look at as well, especially if you lose any of those other guys and there's any separation between the other portal candidates. So quarterback and offensive line are the 2 that I'm most focused on.
Offensive line is it, my man. I look forward to hearing what Herb Hand sounds like on the practice fields with all these new bodies. And I understand it. You don't need 5, but I could take 7. It'd be fun just to, when they say that they might have an 8-man rotation, that they might have an 8-man rotation. Eddie, thank you very much for the contribution. He says, go Seminoles. That's it. Appreciate that. We appreciate all contributions and all questions in the chat. Yeah, I think, Ira, it's more interesting to me to see how the defense is constructed. But like when we get post-portal time, like where they move guys, how they configure the defense, and because Tony White can be multiple. So I'm more interested in seeing that after the portal is over. But while the portal period is on, I think you're right. It's the offensive side. They're going to need receiver help too, especially with Destin Hill leaving. You need some experience there. Yeah, they do. And I guess part of my thing with the offensive line, going back to that, because I get your point. I also, and I think I talked about this last week, I still believe that there's a potential for guys that are on the roster to play better if they're coached by somebody else who gets through to them or teaches them things a different way. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I know whether or not Alex Atkins, what he did was right or wrong, but clearly they did not develop offensive linemen at a very high level. And so there's a fresh start for some of these guys who've been on the roster. So, I wouldn't be shocked if we see 1 or 2 of these guys emerge and play better than we've seen from them in the past. Just like, some players want to leave when their position coach leaves. Sometimes it's a fresh start for guys that were not necessarily starters. Receivers, obviously, they could definitely use help there. Running back, I feel pretty good about running back, especially with signing Cromwell. I mean, that guy looks super impressive, at least against high school talent and playing against good high schools. In every game, he looked really good. And then I think, you like some of the guys that got coming back as well. It wouldn't be the end. It wouldn't be like, I wouldn't be aghast if they went and got a running back out of the portal, but it's not like I don't think a top priority. How about reuniting with CJ Campbell? No? Do you want that story? I mean, hey man, I've talked to a lot of people about that over the last couple of weeks, both at FSU and outside of FSU, people that know CJ, and I think it would be a great fit. I mean, CJ, he goes to FAU. The reason he left really was because he didn't know that he would get a fair shot at Florida State. He had been a backup and a walk-on and wanted to get a chance to, be a primary ball carrier. So he bet on himself, goes in the portal, goes to FAU, and they were terrible this year. Their coach got fired. Their offensive line was not very good. He had over 1,300 all-purpose yards. He ran for 800 or 900 yards, caught another 400 or 500 yards receiving. He's a really good receiving back. There was some traction there with Florida State, and Florida State did offer him. But I wonder with getting Cromwell, I wonder if that changed the equation at all, because CJ Campbell has 1 more year of eligibility remaining. I don't think he's going to want to come here and go back to being a backup again. And so that would be, I wonder if it'll work out, but I would love to see it. I think CJ, and he was a great locker room guy. Everybody loved him. And
it could be a good fit. I just don't know if it would work.
It would be perfect. It would be fitting. And I'm talking about behind the scenes stuff. Ira knows all too well. He has an excellent deep dive piece on CJ Campbell that was released earlier this year. And it's a great look into a wonderful story.
Yeah.
And the kid transferred just before I was about to release it. So,
No. I wrote it. I wrote it after he transferred. Like I knew he was.
You wrote it completely after he transferred.
I knew he was transferring. Yeah. That was the whole story was. I wanted to do his story all along anyway, and then he decided to go in the portal, and I was like, you know what? I thought it was a cool story. His story is just amazing. His life story is crazy.
Yeah, it is.
You can find it if you Google Warchant, CJ Campbell. There's a headline you can. Anyway, betting on himself, and he left. Like the whole thing was about how much he was regretting wanting to go he didn't want to go in the portal because he loved Florida State and he loved the fact that he had an opportunity here, but he felt like he could play and he didn't know if he would get the chance and it was conflicted. But yeah, no, we knew he was leaving when we wrote the story.
I'm putting this particular story in the chat for everybody to find. If you're,
and I think it would be an unbelievable story if he came back. I would love to see it happen. I think he can play. I mean, again, he had 1,300 yards last year at FAU for a bad football team. But he's got great speed, really good hands. But, I just don't know if it's going to work out because of them, getting such a big time running back recruit.
All right, sir. Before we say goodnight and we take Michael to the dais for questioning, he's going to be under the gun. It's going to be like the mail fraud case in Seinfeld. They're going to put the light right in his face and say, answer my questions. You have been waiting, Ira. We're now under 10 days, but nearly 10 days into the offseason. You had been waiting for this moment, and here we are. How's it been against your expectations, Florida State's offseason so far?
Yeah, man, it's what I was hoping for. Again, like we talked about earlier, it wasn't to me, it was never a matter of whether or not Florida State was going to be invested or committed to turning things around. It was just we had to wait for it to happen. Like you had to wear those losses through all of October and all of November till you got to that point. And I knew I was confident Mike Norvell would make changes. I did not know it would necessarily be both coordinators. I thought, some people I talked to thought one coordinator. Some other people I talked to thought it might be the other coordinator, but they fired both coordinators. And also, some position coaches move on as well. So I'm excited about it, man. I'm not thrilled. It's not a happy day to see Odell Haggins kind of come off the field and not be a defensive line coach. I've got a story coming on Odell on the website, but he's meant so much to this program, back to his days as a player to now as a coach. And talking to some former players for that story, just living back the memories of him stepping in, leading them to that win against ULM to get bowl eligible. After Jimbo left, kind of righting the ship. And then, again, after Willie got fired and nobody's really meant more to this program, I don't think, in so many different ways over the last couple of decades. And then, it's cool that he's going to stay part of the program, but, I'm going to miss him. You and I will miss watching the trenches and seeing Odell coaching hands-on. But I think it's also exciting what Terrence Knighton can bring. I think there's going to be a lot more energy on this recruiting staff. I think it's a good combination. I think they've got a good combination of some experienced guys that have been in the battle at high levels. Power 5 football. Gus Malzahn's been in it at the highest levels. Tony White's been in it at high levels, and then you also have some young, energetic recruiters as well. So I think that's positive. So I like what they're done so far, and I just now it's a matter of the next two steps are, number one, obviously flipping the roster, which they're doing and they're in the process of right now. I mean, it may end up being 45, 50 new players by the time it's all said and done. And then it's a matter of those guys, these new coaches and these young new players all kind of coming together, seeing what the chemistry looks like. And again, we don't know what that's going to be, but at least it's a fresh start because what we saw over the last 10 months was not going to get it done.
That's why what happens over the next 3-4 months is going to be so fascinating to document, so fascinating to watch. And I, like you, Ira, nobody had less patience for somebody not getting lined up on the ball than Odell Haggins. I'm going to miss that incessant screaming the defensive lineman to get lined up, get on the ball, as he would yell. It would echo even though it was outdoors, it wasn't in the IPF, it would still echo off of some kind of wall. We're going to miss.
Can I tell a funny story real quick about Odell?
Telephone, absolutely, yeah.
Just real quick. So in the story, interviewing people, I interviewed Travis Johnson, who played for FSU, obviously in the mid 2000s, early to mid 2000s, and I was talking about just Odell, like, keeping guys in line and being so demanding, and Travis Johnson said, he's like, well, the thing is, man, we knew we couldn't mess with him because he was stronger than all of us. He said he told me the story about they were at a birthday party for, I think it might have been Odell's birthday. They were having a party at a pool, and a bunch of the defensive linemen, Broderick Bunkley, Darnell Dockett, Travis Johnson, Jeff Pigwomble, all were trying to throw Odell in the pool. And he basically beat all four of them off by himself. Like, he's throwing guys off of him. He's got Dockett in a headlock. I mean, hearing Travis Johnson tell the story is amazing. And again, it just kind of gives you an idea of, Odell, just kind of the strength of that guy physically, but also what we saw over the last 30 years is the strength of him as a person and what he's meant for the program. So it's cool that they're able to keep him as part of the program, even though he won't be, as hands-on.
He's been a healer, like you said. He's been a healer for the program multiple times, and as devoted as any alum in college football history to be around for decades and decades. We will be covering a lot more when it comes to what the defensive, modus operandi is, the philosophy is. We're going to be seeing about Nebraska players coming to Florida State, UCF players coming to Florida State, maybe saying yes and following their former coaches. We're going to get into that with Michael Langston in just a second. Ira, appreciate it. Anything you want to promo on the way out, or are you just going to say sayonara for now?
Plenty more portal coverage, plenty more team coverage coming as well. Matt and Michael both have a bunch of stories coming to the website. And then, like you said, on Wednesday, we'll have those coordinator interviews, which should be a lot of fun to kind of see. It's our first chance to talk to Gus Malzahn and Tony White and kind of get a feel for why they came and what their vision is. And again, just kind of continuing to move that clock forward to the future and away from every day we move forward is a day away from what we just watched for the last 4 months.
Thank God for that. The Gus bus has driven into the portal. Who's he bringing out with him? We'll find out in 15 seconds. Thanks, I really appreciate it. And a word from State Farm agent Russ Fortas. Be right back.
Contact Russ Fortas for an auto quote today.
Here we are with Michael Langston. He's going to be taking your questions on the transfer portal. We're going to be talking about big topics here on Monday Smash. Michael, slow day at the office?
Yeah. Yeah, it's been crazy, very chaotic, probably even more chaotic than I thought it'd be. Just it felt like every 5 minutes there was a guy entering the portal and that you had to check on and, keep your phone charged and make sure you can communicate with the people you need to, just checking on a lot of different guys, man, ton going on. Obviously, we've kept it updated as far as Matt has a really good organized list to kind of tell you kind of what's kind of the guys so far, and then certainly we've dropped some nuggets and stuff on just what we're hearing about certain guys as far as in the portal. So I think it's only I hate to say this, Tom, but I think it's actually going to get crazier in the next day or so because I think there's going to be more. And then you start getting all these visits lined up, and I think FSU is going to be very busy next week.
Well, we were texting earlier today, Michael, and you said we can talk about quarterback fun in the portal. Yeah. And I see that this was, look at this. Here we go in the chat. There's one. There's another. A lot of questions about quarterback. Spartan, Old Liberty, or Tulane quarterback. Jan is saying, who's our quarterback next year? There's a bunch of things that I didn't star, or Director Ben didn't star, about Castellanos. Just what is the latest in the transfer portal developments at quarterback for Florida State? What you've been covering?
Yeah, I feel it's very. It seems very clear that Thomas Castellanos is the guy that I think they're honed in on. That's the gist I've got from different people. I know Caden Salters was one there. I just didn't. When I did the checking, I didn't feel like the fit was connecting for whatever reasons. I don't want to get into that, but just stuff that wasn't measuring up. Whereas with Thomas, there was a previous connection. Gus has coached him. He's probably also worked with Herb Hand, or at least knows him, I would think. And so I think everything kind of checks off. I mean, a lot of people might not know this, but Thomas out of high school really wanted to go to FSU. That was kind of his, his dream school. When we talked, played at Ware County, and FSU liked him as more of an athlete at that time. Obviously, he showed some things on kind of like Ira did with the CJ Campbell, kind of bet on himself as a quarterback, where a lot of schools, liked him as an athlete. And I think the most the focus would be on Thomas. I think I got people revved up when I mentioned, what if DJ decides to come back? If there's a 6 year or something, and obviously people have different opinions of that. Yeah, for me, if that were to happen, I'm not hating it, to be honest. If you get Thomas and him, because they're different you need diversity in that quarterback room. And I know everyone's there's certain people that are like, it's all DJ's fault of what happened last year. Where for me, it's more everything around DJ. So when I look at that, not to say that DJ didn't have his issues of stuff that he could have done better, but I think overall, Thomas seems to be the focus for me, and I think they're likely that's the guy they're probably going to land. You mentioned all the interviews on the coaches on Wednesday, but there's another thing important Wednesday is Thomas is visiting. So Thomas will be visiting that morning, or in that day, full day, and so we're going to be out there, and I'll certainly we'll see we catch up with him, but it's going to be interesting, and I just have a feeling, and this isn't based on intel, that this one could go, pretty quickly if everything checks off and the visit goes the way they want, because of the connectability with each other. And like I said, I know there's people that are excited about Thomas, and I know there's people that are like, man, that guy struggles throwing the ball as far as stuff like that. But overall, I would really like the addition personally, and that's just me watching and knowing what FSU's weaknesses are as far as what I see on the field, how he would not elevate that, but just he brings a different aspect to that can help that offense.
Yeah, especially, if your offensive line is going to get better but not great, you definitely want somebody who can get on the move. And that's the way Gus runs his offense. Michael, is Thomas Castellanos, and I see somebody asking a question in the chat, is that how you pronounce it? Is it Castellanos? It's not like Nick Castellanos. I swear, every play-by-play guy in the country says Castellanos. I speak Spanish. I don't speak it fluently, but I agree. That you would think it's Castellanos. You need a mobile quarterback, and this is the way Gus runs the system. So you got to go all in with the way your offensive coordinator designs his offenses, and he fits it to a T. I mean, Nick Marshall for Auburn was a converted defensive back, and they got to the precipice of winning a national championship with a small guy with a decent arm who could run and was tough. I mean, it seems like that would be the formula here.
Yeah, and the thing is too, there was a kind of a known quarterback that played at FSU that's pretty popular here, that is got similar traits to what Thomas has, and that is Jordan Travis. When he got here, man, I would sit in the stands, guys, and I would listen to recruits, and I'm not going to say who they are because I'm going to keep them safe, but they were like, man, this guy is terrible, like really bad. And so and that's what I always tell people, like, whether you're watching them from another school or you're watching them with what they've done at FSU, like, they're going to be a different player than what you saw at that school. Just because they were really good at another school doesn't mean they're going to be really good at your school. So I think a lot of people lock into that mode that's going to happen. And I just think, like, if you look at the skills, the ability to keep plays alive, the understanding of how to run, and certainly, and we saw with Jordan Travis, like the development of the passing they fixed that in almost a year. It was like, I remember going into that LSU game in the Superdome, and it was like, I don't know what I'm going to see. And then he comes out there and just tears it up. So I'm saying, like, you got to go with the fit that everyone's comfortable with. Player, coach, whatever. And I think this one just checks off the ones that you want. I mean, I understand the struggles as far as in inconsistency as far as throwing the ball, but I think overall, when you look at the fit and the comfort for both sides, this one just makes too much sense.
We'll see. Yeah, strong opinions if that is going to be the guy Florida State backs, and we'll have months to vet it if that's the direction it goes. Brett was asking a question about those timelines. Now, you said that it could go quick, quarterback potentially. But what do you think, generally speaking, Michael, about timelines for guys to maybe say yes to Florida State? I mean, you could see it on the On3 tracker. You know,
Yeah.
the portal opens, and within an hour, somebody's down to a final 3. It's like, come on, man. You're supposed to be talking to each other for the first time when the portal opens. We all know that's not how it works, but just your thoughts on timelines.
Supposed to be is a very appropriate word, wording to that.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, I mean, it really just depends on each guy. I mean, it's like, I talked to my brother today, and he's like, what do you, the portal? He wasn't asking about civics, but just basically like, how does it go as far as timeline? It's like a doctor being on call that you just don't know when it's going to happen, and each one's kind of different. I would say with the quarterback position, I think that one goes pretty quickly. I think some of the defensive players that certainly Matt covered today, and I chimed in on the story from Nebraska. I think those could also go a little quicker. Guys like the Jackson kid, and then also the Butler kid. I think those could both go pretty swiftly, assuming everything checks off. But overall, there's not really a timeline to, I mean, because they have like almost, I think, a full month with this stuff. So, it's almost like there's a lot of time to visit different schools and with this portal window. So, I think overall, it just really depends on the player and the connection. I mean, because we know there's connections with certainly with the Nebraska guys to Tony White, so that speeds up the process. And then you'll have certain guys that come in, whether it be a wide receiver or running backs. I've covered a few that on the PRB of guys to kind of keep an eye on. Like Barry and Brown. I think TJ. I'm forgetting his name from UCLA, to running back, but he's a guy I mentioned in there.
Yep,
I think
Harden. Yep.
Yes, Harden, TJ Harden. So I think there's guys in there, but it really just depends on one, how the visits matriculate and go, and the connection with the coach. If there's a previous connection, sometimes it tends to speed up faster, but really there's really no a specific timeline for every guy. It's not like, like, hey, they got till this time and it's going to be this. I think with portal, it's kind of like you're going to have to go through this whole window, whatever it is. But I think the thing to pay attention to is the ones that they have previous connections to. Those tend to go faster.
Yeah, it's like if high school recruiting is a symphony, and how it builds and it goes, this is techno. This is dubstep, because you got to know names, you got to know them fast. They're in, they're out. They might be visiting, they might not. Never mind. You don't make their top 3. It's just on steroids, this particular part of the process. And Kyle's is asking about that receiver from Kentucky. Any word on Barry and Brown? What's the latest you're hearing, at least between Florida State and the Kentucky receiver?
Yeah, I think Barry Brown's one that I feel pretty confident that he's going to visit. I think Ole Miss and FSU are the two teams that I've heard the most frequently. I think that's certainly a place that I could see him feeling very comfortable, especially with a guy like Gus. Like I told people last week, with the names that connect with recruits and players, that's why it's so valuable when you get to this portal window where you get these guys where they're not worried about the wooing and the impressing and the whining dying. They're worried about who has the X's and O's that I can lean on, and who has the exciting team that I can lean on. And I think with a guy like Barry, and you can certainly offer that. Certainly, it would help to name a receivers coach. Certainly would help kind of speed up that process. But as Ira said, if you're getting closer and you're getting that done, and at least Norvell can when you're dealing with all these receivers, at least tell them this is whether mentioning who you might think it is, or if you're close to doing that, or if the kind of principles that you're going to run with the receiver coach and the different things. I think that stuff that you can share. But I think overall with Barron, that's the one that I'm certainly keep an eye on. There's a few others. There's certainly others that'll be in there, but I think it would make it easier if they certainly knew or had an idea, who the wide receivers coach is. But I think with Barron, that's one that I'm definitely tracking for sure, and one that I think they're going to get one, or I think they're going to get two personally in this class. Just I think like with this class, especially with Destin Hill leaving, or at least potentially going into the portal, that was one of your that was the one where I felt like, hey, he's going to do something, or he's a guy that you could maybe lean on a little bit more. And I think so. I think now it's even more imperative that you probably need, probably two to get in this class, some experienced guys. But I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I think these things all work itself out once you get the receiver coach in there. And there's tons of times it feels like not imminent, but it feels like soon that you could get that name, and then I think then we're going to start to see some speedy stuff going with the wide receiver position.
I'm going to demonstrate a neat little function that we do have on the PRB. Michael has the updates and the intel thread, and then also Matt put together the chart thread where you can see player name, interest level, visiting. It's nicely laid out. Forgive me if I don't pronounce this right, but Kajukenbo. All right, there we go. Do we have a guess as to how many Nebraska? Well, Michael, I was gearing up for that for like 5 minutes. I'm like, okay, how am I going to say that? Do we have a guess as to how many Nebraska players might come with the staff hires? Okay, so I'm going to demonstrate this part of it, and this list is going to continue to build. That's why I don't feel bad sharing what the subscribers have access to on the PRB. There it is. Look at this. It's a nice little chart, puts together all of these particular players, and you can see there 3 Nebraska players figured to be at least visiting Florida State next week.
Yeah.
Michael, what say you? Do you think the number's around 3? Could it be more? Nebraska and Florida State, obvious ties with the new defensive coaching hires.
I'd say 4 for now. I think around that 4 mark. I said Jackson earlier. James Williams. Sorry, hope his mom wasn't watching. But James Williams, Prince Swill is another one that I feel like I see coming to this class, and then I've already covered Butler, so I think you're getting those guys, and then you have guys like Stephon Thompson, who's a linebacker who seems to really fit there, and then the new target that was covered earlier today, Keandre. I'm drawing a blank, but if you go to the PRB, you'll see it. He's a new guy we added. He's also another edge guy that is on there that I've heard a lot. I was kind of waiting for him to enter. So I think I'm circling around 4, pushing it to 5 maybe, but 4 is probably the number that I'm at right now.
Yeah, Keanu Davis, is that correct?
There you go. There you go.
Keanu Davis. Yeah.
There you go.
I mean, it's like opening up a phone book and circling people. Like, here they are, here they come.
Guys, I'm good with names, but when you're dealing with new stuff, it's kind of hard to to remember just each one of them. But yeah, that's one that. So I think those 4 that I covered. I think there's I think FSU feels like there's certainly a solid chance that they could pull those. So that's what I would say 4.
2 offensive line questions coming next. Brian Bruns, not to be confused with Brian Burns, but he says, can we talk about what effect Coach Herb Hand will have on our recruiting? And the follow-up on that is, what about offensive line in the portal? So whichever one you want to go with first there, Michael, Herb Hand and impact for FSU.
Yeah, very well connected guy. Everything I've heard was, good, solid recruiter. Didn't hear like, oh, elite and crazy, but I think it's good. It's pretty solid. The wording I've gotten, and 2, I'm not going to lie. The first guy I thought about was Chaston Brown when the 4-star offensive lineman that was committed to UCF. That once all this stuff happened, I think Matt's covered that, where he's done a story where he's very tight with Gus, and then I think when you have his offensive line coach that was there, I think certainly that makes a big difference. I think now. I think FSU would be tough to beat personally. When I look at that recruitment, he did eventually DM me. It was kind of funny. He DM'd me the day where it was already done with the early period, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm doing it in February." I was like, "Yeah, it's kind of academic at this point," but he hit me up, and I just think that's a guy that they eventually end up with, because he seems to be a guy that's connected with relationships. So offensive line, that's one to definitely I'll be monitoring. And Marcelius Marshall was a guy they offered from UCF. I've heard he's visiting this week. I'm still working on the exact day that he's coming, but I do think that's going to happen this week. He played for them. He's a guy that certainly Herb knows really well. I think you would think that's another one where I talk about things could go quickly if things connect, and he feels a comfort there. I think that's one that you could see. That FSU, start reeling in. I think he's an offensive tackle. I could be wrong. Tom can correct me, but I think overall, those are a few. I think you'll have a few more. There's a center also at UCF that they're very involved with. I do think it'll visit FSU. Maybe Tom can pull it up. I I'm drawing a blank. I want to say Caden.
Yeah, let's see.
Yeah,
Cason Johnson.
yeah.
Caden Kittler is who you're talking
Yeah,
about.
that's it. That's
Yep.
it. Caden Kittler. He's a guy that I think the center position is one that I've really circled. I know Ira gave up, kind of all this stuff. The center position is one that I'm really circling, Tom, because I think that's really one of the most important places for FSU, not just on the offensive line. And I'm with you. I would like to see probably 6 or 7, as far as on the list, because I want to have versatility and choices of what I can play. I mean, they still have some guys. I think people forget the talent that they already have on their team. That's certainly there. That haven't hit the portal, assuming they stay. I think there's stuff to work with, but I kind of want that 6 or 7, in there, and certainly you want to see multiple center prospects for me, and then two, I want to see that tackle position addressed. I think that's something that they're heavily gonna push for on the offensive line.
I know one of the big names that's out there was Northwestern transfer Josh Thompson, interior offensive lineman. PFF loved him. He was, I
Yes.
think, the second best offensive lineman according to PFF in the Big Ten. We'll see. There's a bunch of SEC schools that are interested in him right away. So that takes me. You can either address that or this part of the question from Hawaii. Noel, can CBE go toe to toe for these SEC B1G offensive linemen in the portal? You think that Florida State could be a player for some of these big names as they emerge?
I do now because they have an offensive line coach. I think that's a big pivotal part, and you have an offensive line coach that's been around that. I mean, I don't people thinking that can truly grasp when you have somebody that's experienced, that's done the job. That I think I look back that nearly every place Herb Hand's been, he rushes the ball. His teams run the ball really well. I think top 10 nationally is kind of the thing I saw. So I think that's the most important thing, Tom, going the next year. It isn't about like, hey, this or whatever they have, but I think overall, if FSU can run the ball, that really shifts kind of what kind of season they feel they can have. So, yeah, I definitely think they can compete. There's no doubt. The Battleston does a great job. I've said that. They're they've certainly there's certain guys that they didn't get last year, so I'm sure there's quite a bit of value left over that they can definitely push towards the portal and certainly make a heavy covet for a lot of these guys. And I don't think it's going to be a problem if you covet a guy. You're going to certainly be competitive. I don't see that being a problem because a lot of these kids from the portal, they're looking for one to fit, but also they're looking to play. Say, hey, am I going to get the chance to play there? And what do I have around me as far as coaches? And I think with the coordinators FSU's had, I think that's going to be attractive.
You see what the fans believe, Mr. P.A. Knowles. Go get the Northwestern kids. Drop big bags. And then Brett says, I want a brand new 2-deep chart on the O-line. So in case there's anybody working with the Florida State staff, and you're wondering where the people's minds are at, the people's minds are in the trenches. Let's see. Here we go. Next up, a question from Florida Man in Alabama. You got a personal top 5 right now, or a few names that you like to fit for Florida State?
Personal top 5. That's a tough one. I don't really. There's a few receivers I like. I'd certainly would love KJ Daniels out of LSU, but I just feel like that's a guy they're working on. But I just don't feel like that's kind of. But Baron Brown would definitely be in my top 5. I certainly love what I see there, and then there's some offensive linemen that I like, but it's like I don't really like to do a top 5 because it's like I give you a top 5 and then they don't get it, and then it's like I think people believe that I believe that there's a chance, so I don't want to tell people there's a chance there. But there's a lot of great guys that I've covered on the PRB, and certainly a lot of top prospects. I haven't seen one that's like, man, they definitely got to have that guy that they're like really, really, I think active with or that we've covered. I would say Josh Thompson will be pretty high up there. I just love the PFF grades and the way certainly those stand out. I also like the UCF center. I think that really stands out to me of just his productivity of what I've seen and watched. So definitely some of those guys, but hopefully a majority of them are offensive linemen. So I would say anything with a high productivity as far as PFF grade, and I feel like the fit is there. I think those are kind of guys that would be high on my top 5 if I had one.
So you agree with the people that the offensive line needs to be the place they go to work. So Derek Simmons is a name that's going to be visiting Florida State. He's a Western Carolina offensive tackle transfer. He's coming in, it looks like, this weekend.
Yeah.
Anything on that particular player, or is it just is he a guy that Florida State is like set on, Michael, or from what you're hearing, or is he's coming in and they're going to get to know him a little bit better? Because there have been a lot of guys in the portal over the last few years that Florida State brings them on campus, and then they're like, nah, pass. So I know for some it might be like, yes, that kid is here because we need to get him to say yes to us. What about this player, Derek Simmons?
Yeah, and Derek's originally from Jacksonville, so there's certainly in-state connections there. And then he was one of the first guys that I'd heard, that before the visit was set up. So I tend to believe that they've had a lot of time to decipher if they're going to enter or they enter. And then when they enter, go after. And he was like one of the first, like right when he entered, that I felt like there was communication. So he's one that on paper, based on what we know with all the background checks and everything, and when they do all that stuff, he's one that you feel like, I think they feel comfortable that this is a guy that we would like to covet. And certainly the visits, you don't know for sure, but visits are usually kind of an indication of how they're set up, of just how the push is going to be. And I think, he would certainly fall into that category. I think he's one that certainly they want. I think he visited Mississippi State previously before he's going to come to FSU for a visit. And he's just one that I think that it makes a lot of sense when you study his game, of what he does and the strengths of his game, and how it would translate to FSU. It seems that connection is there. And I think FSU feels good just about him in general, his skills, and it just feels like on paper, it looks like a one they covet.
Remember, everybody, to head to warchant.com because we're about to sign off here in a moment. But the board updates. What would you say, Michael? Every 5 minutes, there's like maybe 4 new posts from staff members. I mean, it's. I was watching it today. It's a marvel to see. It's constant updates and constant change on everything from guys leaving Florida State to visits that might be secured to nuggets that you provide on the PRB. Go ahead.
Yeah, you're seeing players that leave, and I know people get down when they see certain guys are good that leave, like Justin Hill and even Omar Graham, who was productive last year, guys like that. But I mean, that's part of it, and it's very chaotic. That's why I tell my parents and my family, don't call me because I'm not going to be available for a while. So basically, it's every 5 minutes it feels like somebody's entering or something's popping, or either a guy's leaving FSU and seeing what's out there, or there's a new target that pops in the picture that we find out that is expected to enter the portal. It's very chaotic. I can't really put it into words because there's so much. Fluid is a very good word for it, because there's a lot of fluidness of 1 minute, like 1 hour, you can have a guy that it's fluid where, okay, they're going to covet that guy, and then you get something 30 minutes to an hour later, maybe sometimes 2 hours, and it's like, okay, there's not as much, connection or a push that we thought there would be. So there's a lot of fluidness, and it's hard to explain because it's not like any other job that you would deal with, because it's not like high school recruiting where you kind of know what you're going after, what's laid down, the principles, and what's going to work and what isn't. I think with Porto, it's more, can you sell them on what you're going to be, whether you're a proven program or you're in FSU's position where you're trying to reestablish your brand, as far as what you want to be. So it's a very challenging thing. Obviously, Matt's done a great job of certainly assisting me and doing stuff, and everyone with the team, I think, is certainly contributed. But I think overall, grand picture, it's going to be fine. I think they're going to get what they want for the most part of most of the targets. But I think it's very key to understand and this isn't something that subscribers like, is patience of just letting the coaches do their job and being patient on the right guy, not the guy that you just want, because there might be a former 5-star that you want, but there might be a guy that's maybe a high 3-star that's been productive at another program that they feel like can really give them a bigger shift than that type of player.
This is also the time of the year to remind everybody, don't don't assume what you're reading is true.
Yes.
There's a lot of trolls out there. There was even one in the chat here that said Cam Coleman from Auburn is in the portal. That's not a true report. It's gotten a lot of people on X. If you're one of our older people, we thank you for finding your way to YouTube, and you like Facebook as your medium. That's usually where that kind of stuff lives too. Don't get tripped up. Make sure you go over to the premium recruiting board on Warchant for the latest information, and always check the handle of the posts.
Yes.
They can even change their logo, and it might look like it's an On3 or whatever. This is that silly season, but it's also a season of savings for you as well. The 150 special is continuing. I just checked just to see if On3 was continuing for silly season, and they are. It's $1 for 7 days of access to warchant.com. followed by half off your first year's membership. It is an outstanding savings, and it is the time to go see everything that Michael has updating for you on the premium recruiting board. The news keeps coming in, and it's going to be coming in all month. Again, this is about entering the portal. This is your period of time from the 9th till I think it's the 28th, whatever it is towards the end of the month. That is when the portal is open. But then, Michael, the deadline is basically enrollment on campus. As long as you show up before ad drop is over, you can be in time for Florida State spring football. So this is a humongous time to be joining us on warchant.com. $1 for 7 days of access, then half off your first year at Warchant. All right, Michael, this is the last question I'll ask before we sign off tonight. We want to say thank you to everybody. So what comes next for you? Like as you're getting back into the machine, you checking with sources at Florida State? Are you checking in with the people like Nakos and people at On3? What's next for you?
Yeah, you continually check with people that's connected with the player, whether it's there's a lot of different angles you do, but certainly we'll have a lot of articles coming up on targets. I've done a 5 to watch for FSU for the offense, and I've done one for the defense. That should go up, certainly coming up soon. And don't exclude that it's only those 5. Those are just 5 right now. I've got a lot. I've got like probably 30, 40 prospects on my board that I'm looking at that I could do stuff on. But those are the 5 that I'm kind of focused on a little bit right now. Certainly we'll have that coming up. And then we'll do a lot of features on these guys visiting. Thomas is visiting Wednesday, so that's one that is a big moment, I think, for FSU. I think you'll have visits later in the week and in the weekend that you've already covered, Tom. And I think it was perfect what you said. Don't assume anything's true that you see on there. I think Pete Nakos is a really good follow when it comes to just guys that are entering and stuff like that, and the information wise as far as what's going on with stuff. So definitely following On3, definitely follow Warchant. That's kind of a given, and just it's going to get crazy, and we'll be here for it. And I might even drop a few nuggets late tonight if I get enough stuff that I'll drop a few more things that I have. But it's just going to be probably continue every hour where it's just we'll see what happens. But I do think I've said this before, Tom. I do feel comfortable that they're going to address most of what they want. I think overall it's getting guys that connect with this team. And that doesn't mean getting guys connect with the previous staff. It's guys that connect with this team, this coaching staff. And I think they're on it. I think they're aggressive. People wondered, are they being aggressive in the NIL part of these transfer portals? I've heard they are. So I think it's been something that they know is imperative that they have to do. And I think it's just about executing their plan.
Easy Living says, after many years, I finally signed up. Go Noles. Thank you, Easy Living. We really appreciate that. It's because of folks like you that we get to do what we love to do, which is covering this particular team. Even when it's bumpy as hell, like with the portal, it's totally bumpy. Unpredictable. Yeah, so on the work, go ahead, Michael.
I was going to say it is bumpy, and it is it's almost hard to explain to people just the recruiting coverage of covering portal compared to high school. I thought that might get that question, but it's just there's such a difference, between the people you talk to that are close to the recruit compared to from the portal compared to high school, because some people are more willing to talk when it comes to high school, and some people are more willing from the portal. It really just depends on the player, and it's challenging. But we're going to get it done, guys. We're going to be here. We're going to give you everything. We're going to do these videos. If you hadn't liked this whole show, like it. Definitely hit the like button for us. And we're going to have a lot of stuff, guys. We're not going to let up. If you think that this is just kind of a hey, they're just doing stuff to kind of give us a rep. Like, no, it's going to be every day like this that we're going to be on this, and we're going to knock it out for you.
And make sure to subscribe to the channel because it'll put us on your home screen for all the latest videos we provide you on Warchant TV, always free and always keeping you up to date. It's a multimedia empire, and we need everybody that's a part of it to pull it off this time of year. We hope everybody is enjoying an early start to their holiday season. Stay warm if you're in the colder part of the country. And remember, all of these shows are available also on Warchant's podcast network. We're everywhere, multimedia-wise. So if you want to take us with you in the car and you don't want to lose some of your data on video, check us out wherever you get your podcasts as well. So for Ira Schoffel, who was here for the first half of the program, for Michael Langston, Director Ben Spicer behind the scenes, and thank you to those who contributed with questions. This has also been the Monday Smash presented by our sponsor that I need to mention, State Farm Agent Russ Voris. Remember who pays the bills here? State Farm Agent Russ Voris, thank you very much for your support. Michael, good night, and we'll talk to you out there, everybody, here on Warchant TV very, very soon.